Okay, thank you. So look, I'd like to say thanks again to Virtual Recruit and Jobs Expo for having me along. It's always great to support them and speak at these shows, especially Cormac, who got me involved in the first place. So look, I'll crack on anyway. So we're at Dublin Coding School. This guy is actually called Zig Mantas. He's one of our lecturers, so it's not just a fake photo. So a bit about me. So yeah, I'm the MD of Dublin Coding School. Did an MBA in Imperial College, studied AI at MIT, and previously worked in other businesses. Enough about me anyway. So who are Dublin Coding School? So we're a tech education provider, and as well as a school, we have a career centre where we help people try and find their way to a job in tech. I can maybe talk that a bit later. We have 4 schools actually. So we're in Dublin, we're in Riga, Vilnius, and Prague, with over 7,000 graduates across Europe. So right, let's get to it. So a career in tech, where do I begin? So a lot of people will come to Dublin Coding School and say, hi, I want to study IT. And we'll go, okay. So I want to do this course in IT or computers. And they'll keep saying that. And we'll say, well, which one? They go, computers, IT. We'll say, well, look, it's very much like saying, I want to do sport. But we're trying to say, like, well, which sport? You know, do you want to play tennis, rugby, swimming? And they'll go, I don't know. And then you have to figure out, you know, which should you play? Are you fast, or are you more of an endurance athlete, or that type of thing? So it can be like that, working out what job you want as well, because you're not just going to do a course, you're probably going to work at this for the next 10 to 15 years. So you want to make sure you're the right fit. So which route? Yeah, which route is best for you? So what I'm going to do now is break down the different departments within the tech companies and just talk about what they actually do. So I'm hoping that all of you don't know, and you'll find this interesting, because if you do know, you might as well leave now. So how are they organised? And this could be any company really, but specifically, I suppose, we're talking about the tech company. So obviously there's sales, marketing, customer success. Customer success, just making sure, very much linked to marketing. But so these roles, I'm not going to talk about those, but there's good careers to be had in them. I'd sort of say if you can sell anything, so you wouldn't really need to be tech specific, although tech companies seem to think you do. IT customer support, of course, there are other roles, but I'm not going to talk about those today. What we're going to talk about is these departments, okay? So UX, UI design, web development or software engineering, quality assurance and testing, data analytics and cybersecurity. Sorry about that double up. Looks like a mistake there in the slide, so that shouldn't be there twice. But cybersecurity as well. So we're going to talk about these departments and what they do, but also how they interact, because it is important how they interact with each other. So I'm going to give a quick example of if we were talking in the construction industry, which I think is one we could all probably understand. The UX UI designers are like the architects. UX UI stands for user experience, user interface design. I'm going to get into it in a bit more detail, but if you imagine they're designing a website or a product or an app, and you know they're sitting around and putting that together. They then hand that over to the web developers, who are the builders, and say, here you go, build that. I've been working on this design based upon all of this feedback we've got. And then the web developers build it. And then the software testers, they have to actually make sure, like structural engineers, make sure the whole thing stands up. So they have to test it, check for bugs, and all of that. Key relationship, really, because if they do find anything, they've got to hand it back to the developers and say, your beautiful creation has all these problems. And then they might kick it back to design. So they're the structural engineers, if you like. Data analysts, the quantity surveyors, I'm sort of struggling to find a job title for them, but they're the ones who are analysing everything. They're extracting data from databases, making business decisions based on it. But they'll be extracting data from the structures that the web developers have built, of course. And then cybersecurity, protecting everything. They're the guards. When we talk about cybersecurity, you're really talking about data. They're hoarding, protecting data, and they'll talk about rings of security around that data. I'll talk about them a little bit future. I don't want to talk too much now. Let's use Amazon's website, right, as an example. So it's probably one of the most used websites in the world. I know I use a lot. I recently bought, was it Jessie and Bullseye from Toy Story yesterday for my daughter. So we use it quite a lot. Now, when you look at this website, let's look at Amazon's departments. First of all, that website had to be designed initially, and they're constantly redesigning it, okay? If you click somewhere, or if an area isn't being clicked on a lot, they'll go, right, maybe we should move that button. Maybe we should, let's have a look at that. They'll test it with a few thousand people. These are the designers and have a mock-up. They'll check, like, if you're over 65, what colour should it be? Where should the button be? And all of that. That's what designers are thinking about, empathy for the customer. So it needs to be designed. Then when it's designed, it needs to be built again. Then they have to test it. Of course, if there's big bugs on Amazon and there's leaks or whatever, there's a big problem. The results need to be analysed. So the data analyst to be like saying, this is selling, that's selling, this isn't. I've crunched the numbers, have a look at this. And then it needs to be protected. All of the credit cards on there, absolutely it needs to be protected. So that's what these people do. The UX designer, UX UI designer is the one designing it. The web developers are there in that team, building it, rebuilding it all the time. The testers are testing it. The data is being analysed, and then the cybersecurity people are protecting it. Let's look at the banking sector for a sec, right? So in this area, you want to think, how did you communicate with your bank? Now, I'm probably older than most people in the audience, not all of them, but if you do remember having to go to the bank, and you'd have to go in at lunchtime. At lunchtime, they're closed, right? The door's just shut. You can't get in. Then they reopen, but they're only open for 2 hours. Then they shut again at 5, and you can't. That's it. And if you're late, you're late. That's your problem. You could probably send them a letter, fax. There was no online banking or anything like that. So the staff that they were hiring were all tellers. They probably wanted to know, were you good at mathematics? I remember maths teachers in the old days were like, you know, you really need to understand maths because, like, it's not like everyone's going to go around with a calculator in their pocket every day. Of course we do. But you want to think about what staff did those banks need now? And what do they need now? You know, cybersecurity is probably the most crucial jobs in a bank now, but it really wasn't a long time ago, not to the same degree. Bank of Ireland probably hire them more data analysts than any other company in Ireland. Why? What are they analysing? They're just looking at our data constantly. So if you look at this, right, this is, say, the first bank, Wells Fargo in the Wild West. What do you think was on their CV? You know, there's a CV clinic out there. It's probably, could you handle a gun? Could you count? That type of thing. But now, it's all about tech skills and are you tech literate and that type of thing. UX design as well. One of our lecturers, which I'll talk about in a minute, was the UX UI designer who did the Bank of Ireland app. So yeah, this one, exactly. So he designed that. And if you think about it, if you look at that, every team would have been involved in that at some point. So what you're looking at here is, this is the cybersecurity team, isn't it? You have this PIN code you've got to put in. So they would have said, look, everyone's going to have this PIN code. But they don't decide how this looks. They had to tell the design team. And they had to go, okay, what colour should it be? Will we make it red? I think people would probably think, maybe that's not a good colour for it. And then, of course, how would an older person interact with this, a younger person? And the design team would design this. Then they'd have to give it to the development team. And they'd go, okay, the design's nice, but you know, when we design it, it doesn't look quite like that when it's actually built. So they'd have to, all of those teams would have to kick this around, and then they'd have to test it. Because when you release it to the general public, immediately someone finds the fault straight away. Okay, so, and as I said, yeah, it needs to be designed, built, tested, and of course, these teams are the ones that are doing it all. So I'm going to quickly look at each one now, briefly, as a bit of a deep dive. So if you look at the UX UI designers and what kind of people should be doing that job. So it's really about empathy with people, customers. They're doing a lot of surveys, feedback with customers. And it's user experience is one, but then user interface is the other one. So it's how you're actually using systems and that type of thing. And then web development, the web developers. Again, it's a creative one, but it will take coding. It's interesting to say that UX UI designers don't always work with coding. It's one of the areas that's a tech job, but you won't be doing a lot of coding. It's the web developers who will. And the testing QA, if you're inquisitive, or if you're, maybe you wanted to be a detective in a former life, or you like attention to detail, maybe this is kind of one for you. There's manual testing, where you'll basically be you'll write one piece of code and you'll look for one thing. Then there's automation, which is kind of the next step up. And that's where you'll write a piece of code or an algorithm that will go away and test things, 1,000 things. Sometimes they leave them running overnight and they come back and see what they found. It's interesting that it recently, I would say, companies used to be looking for maybe 70% manual testers, 30% automation. Now it's flipped. So companies want more automation testers than manual, 70-30. Now you would do a manual testing course first and then move on to do automation, but it's just interesting. And also in the pay, automation testers get paid a lot more than manual testers. So if this was the career route you were going, you'd probably want to think, I want to train as a manual tester, upgrade myself as an automation, and then get going. And then data analytics, of course. Are you inquisitive? Do you like solving problems with data? And that type of thing. It's also turning data into images. If you look at this screen here, Or if you ever see any graph like that, even in the Irish Times or something like that, a data analyst has created that. They've pulled data from somewhere, turned it into an image that you can visualize, and then they present it. I know one of our lecturers was working at a bank, and he was asked to analyse all of the ATM cash machines in Ireland because they wanted to know where to have cash based for their security teams and when should the security teams be moving money about, because it's quite a big operation. And he was sort of having to scrape data from all these ATMs and say, well, this one gets absolutely depleted whenever there's certain payments come through for older people, and this one is only busy on a Saturday night. This one doesn't get used at all. So they said, well, this one's not being used at all. Let's take 75% of the cash out. So we don't want it sitting there for someone to come along with a lorry and rip out the wall, which does happen sometimes. So they were really looking at these ATMs. And, of course, he had to pull all this data in and then come up with it in different graphs and tables so the senior people could understand it by looking at it, because you can't send them an Excel file. It's a bit like, give it to me in English, doc. The data analyst will make it look acceptable to them so they can make a decision. And then, as we said, cybersecurity, about those rings of security around data. And, that actually starts sometimes with physical security. So your cybersecurity person will talk about that. If you remember, probably you all don't, but when, we can't say it was Mossad, but it was obvious, and the Americans, when they got into the Iranian nuclear plant and destroyed their fusion reactors, that actually was done with a USB stick that they got an Iranian to stick into their own computer. And supposedly what they did was they'd been throwing things over the wall all the time, and one of them had directors' salaries on it. And someone just saw that in Iranian and said, oh, that's quite interesting, and plugged it in, and that was it, bang. But they were trying for years, and that was the trick. So that was a physical trick. Then obviously they have to have the right malware in there to attack their systems. But it came with a physical trick. They said, how do we get around this physical security in this place? That's how they did it. But one of our lecturers and our advisors is Sarah Jane Madden. She's a Chief Information Security Officer at Accruent, based here in Dublin. So she talks about that, the physical, and then you move into the digital rings of security. Really, really interesting. And sometimes, I remember she said she once sent 300 emails to her own staff. And then 3 weeks later, called them all in and said, OK, I've been emailing you all from these accounts, and I want to say, all of these people, you answered them and you clicked on them, and you would have had a huge problem for the company if I was really a hacker. So she was kind of a bit like the mystery shopper, but in reverse, the mystery hacker. So that type of thing. So if that's interesting to you, maybe you should think about cybersecurity. And that's exactly what I'm saying here. So you can lead a horse to water. We all know that. You can't make them drink. So you need to think, which one of these am I actually drawn towards if I'm serious about working in tech? Some people come into our school and go, well, which one's the more highest paid? That's probably a frequently asked question. Well, we always go, well, if you're not really motivated to do that job, you won't be successful anyway. And if you go into one that's maybe just marginally less, after 5 years of being a motivated worker, you're going to start moving up the ranks. So it's really the wrong question to ask. And never ask it in an interview, by the way. I'm not here to talk about interviews, but don't. You really need to think about, as I said, think about which one you're drawn to. You might have, if you're creative and you like creating things, think about UX and web. Have a go. See if you like that. If you're really not creative and you're more analytical, try the data analytics. Maybe you're drawn to that. If you're a very creative person and you say, look, I want to do data analytics because there's more jobs there, you're going to hate it every single day you do it. Okay? So just don't. Try and go for the one that might suit you better. I'm not saying that people who are analytical can't do creative jobs. Of course not. But it's just try and think about your own personality type. You know yourself better than anyone. Which one of these are you naturally drawn to first? Try that one first. Can't stress that enough. And then where do you begin? So what you want to do is start learning the basic skills and start at the beginning. Don't try and run before you can walk. Take it slowly. And then build a portfolio of work, especially in UX and web development. You'll be in interviews and they'll be sort of, the general questions. They'll have seen your CV. Eventually they'll say, right, let's see your work. and that part you can't lie. You'll be showing them, look, this is a bit like going to art college, okay? They'll look at your CV, they'll whatever, but ultimately they're going to open up this, they're going to look at your work, and they're going to make a decision based on that. So you do want to have a tech portfolio. And you can have a portfolio in areas like data analytics and testing and also cyber. So in data analytics, you could have projects done where you've said, look, I analysed this data, these are the visualizations, this was the outcome, that kind of thing. You can show the systems that you've used. Same in testing. So really building a portfolio, but especially in UX and web, where you want to be showing that tech portfolio. Prepare for technical interviews. They are different than normal interviews. So normally, I'm not going to get into them too much here, but other jobs you might go for, all the standard questions, tell me your 3 weaknesses, that type of thing. The tech interviews, you want to be ready for those technical questions and have them ready in your mind. Also, it's good to use sometimes the STAR method. I don't know if any of you know that, but it's a way of answering questions where you'll go into an interview maybe with 4 different stories to tell, and you'll break them down into the situation, the task you had to do, the actions you took, and the results you got. And you just sort of break down the story. So if they say, when was the time you hit a deadline? Well, I'd like to answer that in terms of my time at this company when I was set this task and I did these things and this was the outcome. And have 4 of those stories in your head. When they ask you the question, go to the one that's ready for you. I'm probably going to digress a bit here, but there's a great example of this with Barack Obama. Whenever he was asked a question about the economy, I think the first time, when he ran against, what's his name, the little guy who was in Vietnam. He's dead now. But anyway, not John Kerry, but he was running against the other guy. And they asked him, but Obama, what about the economy? And he goes, well, I want to ask in context of this guy I met in Ohio at a garage. And, the breaks he was getting from my government was this, this, this. And what he did was his business was this. And now he's doing this. So is that good enough for you? And they were just like, well, yeah. And it was just a great soundbite. He had it ready. He said it to almost everybody who asked him about the economy. So if you're asked about something, have your story ready, boom, hit them with it. Now, build a network. In tech, this is really key. You want to be a web developer, you've done your course, you've got your CV ready. Reach out to 40 web developers on LinkedIn and say, hi, I'm looking to be involved in web development. I see you have a career in this space. Do you have time for a 10-minute call? I'd just like a bit of advice because you've been successful and I want to know how you did it. They'd want to be not that nice to not answer you. Most people will, but even if half of them do, you're building up your network. And eventually, in months or a year, who knows, that person come back to you and say, look, a role's opened up, or I know someone who's there, or whatever. So all of our students, I say, build your network on the side. You never know when it's going to come in handy. And then maybe you see a job in a company you spoke to someone a year ago. You can hit them up again saying, hey, I talked to you about that. You gave me great advice. By the way, I see this in your company. Who's responsible for that? You're always trying to get in the back door. Get around the gatekeepers, who are usually low-level HR people trying to block people like you getting in the door. Right, let's look at the tech skills gap and the opportunity. So, according to IBM, data analytics grew by 28% over the last 3 years. This is ads for those jobs. And it's number 3 in the emerging jobs, okay, in LinkedIn, which all sounds really good. But the European Commission has said that there'll be almost 500,000 unfilled data analytics positions in Europe by 2025, okay? So that shows that there's more jobs going to be advertised in this area than there are skills coming through. And if you look at Ireland, and this is a year out of date actually, but Skills Ireland, we're basically saying there's almost 150,000 people in Ireland by 2022, with 8,000 being added every year. So there is an opportunity in certain areas, and data analytics is one of them, but I'd also argue web. And the reason for that is, if you look at this, it looks like a piece of DNA, but it isn't. If you imagine time going along the bottom, okay, and technology innovations are the blue line. So whenever a technology innovation goes ahead of where the education system is, you get social pain because companies want one thing, but people aren't being trained to do it. That could be artificial intelligence now. There's companies screaming out for staff in that area. There's just not enough of them because everyone else is lagged behind where the companies are. So data analytics is in this right now, where companies need more than there are being trained. So what's the solution? So I'd be a fool if I didn't talk about Dublin Coding School here for a little bit. So our courses, well, I hope we're part of the solution, education. We have short and intensive courses, and they're very much practical and hands-on and focused on the jobs market. So they're not led by academics. All of our teachers are working in Irish companies today in the disciplines that they're teaching. So you're learning how to do a job from the person doing it, as opposed to someone maybe who's in university and has never actually worked in that area. And they are online, but 100% live. And we're for adults only, so it's not a school for kids or anything like that. And it's designed for beginners. So we're training people to an entry level. You don't have to be scared coming in. We don't assume any knowledge, and we take you from the ground up and get you ready for an entry-level role. And we've had people coming from all walks of life, from retail, construction, and we even had a beautician from a salon who came in studying data analytics, who I'll mention in a moment, who is now having a really successful career. The topics, so look, we try and target the departments in tech companies. So that's where the topics come from. So it's all the things I was talking about today. And our lecturers are coming from these types of places. So TikTok, Bank of Ireland, WorkCube and Facebook. And then we also have a career centre. So once you finish the course, we'll help with your CV, your LinkedIn. We'll help about interview prep. So I talked a little bit about that with the STAR method, but that they'll deep dive with you for any interviews that you have and get you ready for it. That type of thing. And our partners. So we partner with companies around Ireland, and they let us know when they have open roles or internships, and then we share CVs with them. One of the really good partnerships we have actually is with Trinity College Dublin. So they have a startup hub called Launchbox, and also we have Scale Ireland, where we provide interns to pre-funded startups to get really good experience. And that can really help boost your CV if you're a complete beginner to move on then to other companies. We partnered with Google and their apprenticeship program, so they approved our web development course as being okay to be an apprentice at Google afterwards if you get through their interview process. And Helios, they just can't stop hiring our students. They hired a data analyst last week and a web developer the week before. Now, yes, Svetlana, so she was at Dublin Coding School and then got a job at Tune Release through us, who was one of our partners, and then Accenture, and now she's at a pharma company. So that was a big success story. Now, the second chance. If you do one of the courses, you can repeat it again for free within 12 months. And that's not because we fail everybody, okay? You want to use this strategically, and it's about building the portfolio because we recognize you need it. So if you do our web development or UX course, you do it, you get your project done, you get your certificate. We then allow you to repeat it to do another project which can be professionally graded for your portfolio. If you get sick or COVID or something, we don't penalise you with your second chance. We want you to use that strategically to build a portfolio or to refresh knowledge in a strategic way, not because you were sick or your dog died or something. So if that happens, we just let you do it again. Now, how to contact us. So our website is dublincoding.ie. I'm the general manager, so it's Luke at Dublin Coding. And then we're on all the other regular channels. So you probably know them all, most of them owned by the same person. Microsoft owns LinkedIn, of course. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much. Give a round of applause to Luke, please.
Okay.
Thanks, Luke. That was really interesting. Thanks.